Hi, welcome to part 3 of our short series about awakening. This week I thought I'd give a couple of testimonies, one of my own, one of somebody else's, because testimony is something that you can't hardly argue with, can you? It's experiential, and experience is everything. We can have all sorts of philosophies, read all types of books, and have all kinds of ideas, but at the end of the day, experience is what really matters. And nearly always, as far as I've ever heard, and certainly was the case in my own life, the experience comes first. I remember a guy talking to me, he stopped at a traffic light once, and everything just blew open from his mind. His whole lifestyle, he was crying in his car, people were beeping their horns, but he was going through this big change. But he didn't understand it. It was as he went on with his life afterwards that he began to realize what had happened to him. And it was exactly the same for me. But I'd talk first of all today about Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle is very famous for having written the book, The Power of Now. He's written other books since. Many millions of copies sold. He's spoken all over the world, and he's had a very positive impact in this world. But when he was a young man, it was a completely different story. He's about 28 years old, and he was an undergraduate for Cambridge University, living in London, and woke up one night feeling very disturbed, depressed, suicidal, very anxious, and none of this for any reason. I mean, this is what the mind is like, isn't it? It just drives you crazy without any reason. But unfortunately, this had been happening to him for a very long time, and it was getting worse and worse, until in the end, he said to himself on this particular night, I cannot live with myself any longer. And then, having had that thought, he asked himself, well, who is the I that cannot live with the myself? Is the myself different than the I from the myself? What's happening here? And he started to realize possibly there were two factors at work here. Not two people, two factors at work. And of course, making that distinction makes all the difference in the world between who we really are and what we're observing. The one who's watching is not the thing that's being watched. Now, if you think about it, you have a digestive system and it operates, it does its own thing, and you can be aware of it, but you are not your digestive system. You're the watcher of the digestive system. It does not watch you. I'm aware that I have a spinal column. But my spinal column is not me. It's something I can see at work. I can feel it. If I walk too far, my knees might ache. And so therefore I'm observing the operation of my knees. They work, they have their own operation, but they're not me. I'm watching them. And the mind is exactly the same. And that's what Eckhart Tolle realized on that night, is that he was making a distinction between who he actually was and the operation of a mind that just did what it seemed to want to do. He went back to sleep, woke up the next day, and felt different about life. His whole apartment seemed different. His food tasted different. His cup of tea was nicer. He went for a walk, and the world seemed like a nicer place. And his life seemed to have changed that night. Sometime later, he met a Buddhist monk, a Zen Buddhist monk, who explained that Zen Buddhism was all about quietening the mind, so that we could be who we really are. Because the mind, like the spinal column, like the knees, like the digestive system, like other things in the body, just has a way of doing what it wants to do. But it doesn't mean it's who we are. Who we are is the one that watches this, the I. Okay? He said that when he spoke to that monk, he realized that since that night when he asked that question, that he'd had an 80% difference in his thought life. 80% of the disturbing thoughts had gone. That's a heck of a change, isn't it? Exactly the same thing happened in my life. So I'm the second testimony. As a young man, 22 years old, I was serving another prison sentence. I didn't want to get out of prison anymore because I was so sick of failure, so stuck in the life I was in, that I felt like if I got out, I'd only get into trouble again, I'd go all the way back. And I'd had enough of it. Very much like Eckhart, I just didn't know how to carry on. But what happened whilst I was doing some therapy and trying my best really, is I started to realise that there was an operation going on that seemed to be automated. You know, like I say about the digestive system, it's automated, isn't it? The spinal column is automated. The way we act and the way the heart beats and everything, the way the blood pumps through the body, the way we breathe and oxygenate that blood that goes through the heart and it feeds the organs. We don't think about these things. They're just automated. Well, one of the things that I started to realise in that prison was a huge amount of my behaviour and the words that were being spoken and the thoughts that were happening were just automated. None of it was to do with the present moment or the future. They all seemed to be conjured out of the past, and none of it was true. And unfortunately, all of it was like putting daggers and spears into emotion. You get carried away with it all. And so when I started to realise that, exactly the same process happened for me as happened to Eckhart Tolle. And that was by making the distinction between who I am and the automated operation of the mind. It created like a way of stopping the mind. It just made it calm down, because now the person who was the real me had awakened. He was there. It's what we call awakening. Awakening to who we really are, as opposed to who we're not. I went through exactly the same percentage of change as Eckhart Tolle, about 80% difference in terms of how I was thinking and how I was feeling about life. And just like him, I went through an 80% change of my outer life as a result of what happened on my inner life. He went through a massive change on his outer life as a result of what happened, the changes on his inner life too. Now, as you can see by this little Christmas tree here, this is a time of gifts, things that we may want. And all too often in life, we want things that may change us, that will change everything. And it doesn't really work, does it? I'm not saying don't get nice things, but what I'm saying is outer things will not change you fundamentally, the way you're thinking and the emotion life. Those things don't change. And you'll find that there's a lot of people out there who've got everything that you want, and it hasn't made a lot of difference to them. They still are struggling with themselves. When Eckhart was a young man, when he changed, he wasn't poor and he wasn't a bad person, but he was hounded by thoughts. So what I'm asking you to consider at this Christmas time is who you really are as opposed to who you're not. Is your mind acting in a way that it wants to act? Is it acting in a way that you prefer? Or is it just doing what it wants to do? Is it affecting your emotions and dragging you through a bad time? Because this is all too common in this life with the human species. We're very disturbed in the mind for no reason under the sun. But if we can do what Eckhart did and what I did, and it was almost by accident, it wasn't like we were clever, it just happened really, is that we back away from all this trouble that's going on, this disturbance, into who we really are, and look at this disturbance and say, you are you and I am me. It's very difficult to explain the difference that it makes, but it does make all the difference in the world. It starts to change on the inside, which leads to huge changes on the outside. So I just hope at this Christmas time, you'll give it a thought. It might be worth it.